This is Agronomy Moment. I'm Wendell Cohen. All right, good day, Celena.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Thanks for joining us. We're going to do nitrogen and sulfur, part of our Fertility Series. We actually did this
Take two.
before, but sound card technical difficulties that we always have to stand by. And so,
What is going on here?
David,
Hey,
What's up, Ringer?
how are you?
good.
Good to
Well,
see
it's
you
good
both.
To see ya.
Thanks for joining us here.
Is this what I think this is?
It is
Are you recording a podcast?
recording, and you are live. I mean, you're going down.
Uh-oh. So like the camera's picking up on everything I'm
It
saying?
is.
Yep.
I'm going to have to be very careful
Yeah,
with what I'm about to
you
say.
interrupt at exactly the right time or wrong, depending on how you look at it.
Man, sorry to interrupt. That was not my intention. But
Yeah, but
if
you
they're
know,
wasting your time, their time on your podcast,
yes.
shouldn't they waste their time on mine?
Hey, what do you
Oh,
got?
yeah.
Why
What do you
not?
got?
Well, that's excellent.
Across the acres with Beck's Hybrids. It is a fantastic opportunity for you to learn more about Beck's Hybrids. Not only our customers, our employees, our dealers, who and what we are, our culture, and the unique things that we bring to the table. So I invite you on the
Yes.
podcast provider of your choice to follow along with Across the Acres, a Beck's Hybrids podcast.
And it's a lot of fun. You do fun stuff on there, right?
Well, thank you. I
Yes.
think we do. Yeah.
Yep.
We even interviewed Bethany Gremmel here back in January.
Yep.
And Tim Newcomb the month before that. So we have famous people on our podcast.
Yes.
The original episode was Corey Beck. And hopefully we'll get Scott one of these times. But,
Yep.
Well, shoot, maybe we should have Wendell Cohen.
Selena.
Oh, we should have Celena.
Nobody wants to listen
Have
to me.
interesting people.
Have
I mean,
interesting people?
I'm the agronomy type base type of stuff, so it just sounds.
I think he's pretty interesting, don't you?
Well, yeah.
Well, only because of the people.
That's right.
Yes.
We'll get you
Yes.
next time.
Yes.
Well, hey, I'm interrupting. Sorry. You guys enjoy.
Yes.
Have a great rest of your day. And again, catch out Across the Acres on
Across
a
the
podcast
Acres.
provider of your choice.
Across the Acres. It's a Beck's podcast. You can find it anywhere you find your podcasts.
Absolutely. Good to see you, my
Thank you,
friend.
sir.
Behave.
See ya.
Selena,
Good to
thank
see you
you.
again.
Good to see you.
See ya. Ooh, all right. Now,
No, back
I-
to business.
what were we talking about? Nitrogen.
Nitrogen and sulfur, I think.
I don't think we'll be able to compete against the interest level of that, but
Never.
Anyway, this is what really matters on your operation. The rest of that stuff is just fun stuff. All right, let's see if we can share that slide again. Nope.
Oh,
wrong
Ringer.
one.
Everybody just wants to listen to him.
I know. He is interesting to listen to. Let's see. What did I do?
He's just so captivating. He just
That's the one. No, that's the one. All right, we're in view mode, and so we're ready to roll, I believe. Fertility Series, nitrogen and sulfur. And so, guys, what we are wanting to focus on in this podcast is nitrogen and sulfur challenges that we face every year. I mean, I don't know probably a place in the Midwest that doesn't have it, but I think in Southwest Missouri or in Missouri period, where we get so much rain in the spring, the tendency to get so hot and dry later on, we tend to have those type of challenges that come because too much, too little, all those things affect nitrogen and sulfur actually because of how, what is it? They're not water soluble, but they follow water, right?
yeah, he can be leached out of the
Yes.
soil, denitrification, all that stuff.
Yep. So nitrogen, sulfur management going forward, we're going to dive right in here. And I don't know if I will give my disclaimer about please don't do this on your farm unless you know this is a personal recommendation, but these are tools to add to your toolbox.
Absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about nitrogen, fastest to arrive, fastest to leave.
Yep. And so, of course, that's going to be the most important whenever it comes to corn and corn growth. And obviously, like you said, we are presented with challenges every year. And every year is different.
Yes.
We've got situations where it's really wet. We've got situations it's really dry. Last year, for example, hopefully we don't see that again.
Yes.
But we had a very dry year for the most part across the board. And I think we saw where we probably have a little bit of nitrogen left over in the soil. And you have some
Yes.
genetic gains going on with hybrids
Yep.
that I think we see our economic optimum nitrogen rate probably a little bit on the decrease as far as what we're using, what we need.
What rate has been good?
Yeah,
It used to be what, like a 1.1
yeah,
type of thing to
right.
1, and we're maybe even going to tick below
hmm
in our area.
And like last year with it dry, just didn't
Yes.
use as much of it because the soil was so dry and
Yes.
conditions were just not ideal.
To minimize that risk, though, talk to us a little bit about what practices we can use with this nitrogen to help minimize some of that risk of loss.
I think one really key thing for nitrogen loss, or to help prevent that, is a lot of like our PFR data is showing split applications. So a 2x2x2 system,
Yes.
and I think also one thing is that starting to have more conversations about what is our realistic yield goal.
Yes.
Building our nitrogen practices around realistic yield goals, because if our yield goal is 150 and we're pouring on all of our nitrogen in one, especially in Southwest Missouri or something like that, to where we don't have any room for flexibility. We're cuffed ourselves, and if it does turn off wet and we don't have any more allocation for our nitrogen as far as urea or side dressing or whatever, we've kind of put ourselves in a little bit of a predicament and rescue situations. So where I see that splitting up those applications, and especially your early side dress or top dress or whatever you want to call it, we typically see getting that put on a lot of times in history, like V6 to V8 time frame. But the PFR, what we're seeing is saying, oh, get that on sooner, to where it's really close to crop use. And I think that's a lot of the story there, is that you give it time, a little bit of time before, it needs that nitrogen to give it a little bit of time to break down in the soil to where that plant has that available. So I just think that's one really unique thing that, or we're doing a lot of unique things in PFR with nitrogen, but that's just one of the practices that to help split up your
and I would tag in too, as well as to add to that, is a program that utilizes like multiple sources if possible. And so if you logistically can do this, because logistics play a part in this.
Oh, absolutely.
But if you can use multiple sources at multiple times, you don't have to blow your budget right up front.
Absolutely.
And even though sometimes, like you might say, urea is a higher cost sometimes per unit. Now it's kind of closer, but it has been. But sometimes putting it at that time, like you say, like maybe that V3 time frame, so it's their position in a breakdown or form later. So diving in a little bit further here, there it went, and I think it's going to shift again, maybe. I don't know. Yes, it did. I don't know. I go faster than this thing does.
That's okay.
I don't know. Did it?
Yeah,
there we go. Nitrogen. Talk about uptake just a little bit. What our demands are, and kind of what it does. What does it do to the plant?
Yep. So we're really going to need, like in the slide, if you're seeing the slide, is really good bullet points that Wendell has put in there to kind of hone in on those points. And we see that it's going to be fairly flat, which we see with not only nitrogen, we see it with sulfur, we see it with P and K, all of that. But once it is done feeding on that endosperm, and has its root system started and established, then it's going to very rapidly take up nutrients,
soil nutrients,
especially nitrogen,
yes,
to make sure that it's there to help produce amino acids, chlorophyll. Without nitrogen, we're in a world of hurt.
And especially like in cold and wet conditions, if they were planted into that and we've smeared that sidewall, we start seeing those tomahawk roots, right? And that can be very limiting to that as well. So we are in an environment where we might be interrupted once in a while, but it's okay.
As we can see at the beginning.
Yes, right. There's people chopping through. see if I can advance this thing. Okay. Nitrogen management practices. We talked a little bit about practices already, such as different timing. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing in PFR.
Yeah, so this slide is going to talk about a little bit, go into more detail, I should say, about this, what I was talking about. But here it is on the slide, PFR data showing the return on investment with an additional application and splitting our applications of nitrogen and the benefit that we see getting there at V3 rather than comparison to a V4 or V6 application. Granted, it still returned, but just not as well.
Yep. And so we're seeing, like what we're saying, is the closest to in-season use. Right prior to that is.
And of course, we talk about exceptions all the time, and there's going to be instances where logistically maybe that's not possible.
Yes.
But point is, just as close to crop use as we can get it on there.
Yep. So let's talk about sulfur a little bit, especially as it relates to why perhaps we need sulfur and why it's being talked about more.
Yeah. So on the slide there, you can see the comparison from 2000s to 2020. So 20-year span there where we can really see that the sulfur in the air is nowhere near what it used to be. And I would say it's probably going to get worse.
Yes.
As far as not having that sulfur there. So we talk about that sulfur not being in there, it's not getting into the soil. We don't have near the amount in the soil that we would probably like to have.
Yes.
So when we're going out and making sulfur applications, that elemental sulfur is that we're typically probably going to be applying in a dry form, whether it be in the fall or in the spring, is kind of there to help build that soil. And then our sulfate form is going to be more available for plant use. So that's going to be probably targeted like our nitrogen split applications closer to crop use a lot of the times, like in AMS, just a sulfate form to help be close to that crop use for uptake. Because similar to nitrogen, sulfur is going to be the same as far as its uptake.
And then far as, unlike nitrogen, which is like, you might say 3 digits worth of nitrogen needed for use per year, sulfur is somewhere around that 20 to 30, and really it used to be, I heard a lot of 15 to 18 being put on. That's kind of when it got introduced. But we also have to remember too, in today's world, we're growing better corn. So not only do they have more sulfur deposits back then, but we were talking about sub 100 bushels if you go back into the 80s and 90s.
We're growing better beans
and growing better soybeans, true.
And that has that plays a part also. And I just think it's cool to go back and look at old soil tests compared to new soil tests, if if you could ever find them. And then new soil tests, just the amount of low sulfur in a lot of soil tests, it just goes back to the point of as much sulfur available
naturally.
Right.
Talk a little bit more about, just very briefly, about sulfur and what it does.
Yeah, so it's really important nutrient for proteins and chlorophyll formation, just as nitrogen, and just really, really crucial that's one a deficiency that we can usually see pretty easy.
Yes.
But kind of once we see it, probably maybe a little bit too late as far as that is concerned. So I really like throwing that sulfur in there with nitrogen for side dress or top dress.
I would just mention what I have been talking to Nate Furley, the regional agronomy manager up in Minnesota recently, and talking about how how you can see on the chart how low the usage starts, but we could almost say that if you were going to put a chart of how critical it was, it would be more, that chart would actually level out, right? Because he said even though it's a very small consumption, it's extremely critical to start the foundation of that corn plant. So just because it's a small use, you might say down in this area, that little bit that is there is very needful as that plant comes, like you mentioned earlier, comes off of the relying on the seed.
Well, and sulfur helps with the nitrogen use efficiency in the plant too. So
Sure.
I mean, there's
Yep.
things there too where we can see those benefits.
Yep. And now, how do we optimize our management and do a better job going forward?
Realistic yield goals. And you're going to hit on the plans part, so I'm not going to steal your thunder.
Sure.
So realistic yield goals, and take a look at the PFR information, and just, maybe there's some nuggets there, tidbits that we can take to try to, if we're not running a 2x2x2 system, maybe we can see from that data, okay, I need to get my nitrogen, in-season nitrogen on closer to crop use.
Yeah, maybe that's a spinner, like you're spreading urea and some AMS right at pre-plant, and you work it in, or things like that. Like it says there on the quote, plans are worthless, but planning is everything. I really like that quote by President Dwight D. Eisenhower. And I think, going into the battle of a new season as a farmer, this also applies. We have a plan. You need a plan. It's important to have your plan of where your nitrogen is going to come from, and the supplier you're going to get it from, that they're ready to go when it's go time, and it's not scrambling when it rained 10 inches in the month of May and suddenly we have to come in and rescue. Right. And then we're like, whoa, my plan doesn't call for it.
Yeah.
But you're already preparing. So understanding that key is that the plans, the planning is everything, so that it's there, but be ready to be flexible. I like to say too that, if you can add more sources of nitrogen and more applications, you can reduce your risk of the wrong timing.
Yep.
And it's because sometimes we don't always know when the weather and how it's going to be, but by splitting those, you can reduce some risk there.
Yep, that's a good point.
And so that concludes our hopefully informative piece. Thank you so much for your information and adding to this, Celena.
See you next time.
See ya. Everyone, thank you for joining us today on Agronomy Moment, a Top Ag Services production. If you want alerts on what we are finding in the field, go to topagservices.com/signups to receive alerts, or subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's our goal to bring you the most recent and advanced information possible. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to reach out to us anytime. We also ask you that you give us a like and follow our channel wherever you listen to your podcasts or watch these videos. This ultimately helps us reach more people like you.
Hello?
Hey, this has been Wendell Cohen, your show host. Thank you to all who made this show possible. This show is over. See ya.